Number 10, Cherubims and Angels. We're starting here because I don't know where the cute depiction of achingly beautiful angels came from, because in the Bible, they're terrifying. Considering that every time anyone saw one, they were terrified. Which leads me to think that it must have been a very terrifying experience because they looked, well, you know. I mean, a glowing orb or person coming down from the heavens would be shocking. But consider this description from Ezekiel 1. Also, out of the midst therefore came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass, so they had cow feet and they sparkled, and they had the hands of man under their wings on the 4 sides, and as for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. So for some reason, we have confused the little baby angel things on church ceilings for the horrifying 4-faced half animal half man creature that would fly around. Apparently the image we have of cherubims today, the cute chubby faced baby ones, were a copycat of the Greek and Roman depiction of Cupid, and we know cherubims are important guardians in the Bible, but when did we learn that they looked just wow? I would freak out if I saw one, personally. Number 9, I Am Legion. This next one appears in Mark 5, 1-9. This story should be terrifying were it not for the pigs. According to the Bible, Jesus came across a man with an unclean spirit who screamed in the mountains. The man would cut himself and he would not be bound by any chains, as he would tear them off him with ease. But when he saw Jesus, he ran to him begging for help. But then he condemned Jesus in a loud voice, for which Jesus responded, "Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit." And he asked him, "What is thy name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Here is where it changes from creepy to confusing. The man, or the demons, begged Jesus not to send them out of the country, but into a herd of swine, pigs, that were near the mountains. So Jesus obliged, and the demons flew from the man into the pigs, and then the now demon pigs ran into the sea and drowned. And there were also 2,000 of them, which means some poor farmer lost his business for that year. Why did the demons want to stay in the country so bad and then drown themselves? Did the host need to die in order for them to be released, or did they turn into dolphins? Like, these are the questions we all need answered. Number 8, never tease a bald guy. Kings 2, 23-24. Teasing is wrong. Making fun of people, not cool in general. But should they meet a violent death in return? No, probably not. I think we can all agree reconciliation is better. According to this chapter in the Bible, Elisha was a wise old man who was sadly going bald. He was just walking one day, minding his own business, when a group of kids started to make fun of him. They started doing exactly what mean kids do. They started making fun of his insecurities. Also, Elisha/Elijah just came back from doing some cool things, and he was like a well-liked guy, but he was obviously upset by such a horrid, unprovoked behavior. So he looked back at them and cursed them in the name of the Lord. What happens next? 2 female bears from the forest come over and maul the rascals to death. So violent. Why? Just smack them on the hand and teach them a lesson. That's very, very harsh, and I didn't know that happened. So moral of the story, don't tease a bald guy. Number 7, counterproductive? Exodus 4:21. From what I understood when I was learning about the Bible on Sundays while I was growing up, Moses and the Lord were bros. When Moses first met the Lord, he was so excited, but he also thought no one would believe him, because who would believe anyone when they said, "I'm talking to a burning bush and he showed me all these miracles," kind of stuff. So the Lord said, "Hey, is that your stick?" And he was like, "Yeah." Put it on the ground, turn it into a snake. Whoa. But then when Moses touched it, turned back into a rod. It was like, whoa, that's so crazy. He gave him a couple other tricks to put up his sleeve so that he could perform them for unbelievers, and therefore they would believe that he talked to a burning bush and it was actually the Lord. But then, when Moses returned to Egypt, he said to him, "When thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. But I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go." So he taught him all these miracles, and then when it was time for him to perform his task, he deliberately made it harder for him. He continues to say, "And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, Let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn." So he purposely hardened the Pharaoh's heart, and then threatens to take their sons because he won't let Israel go, which is exactly what God made him not want to do. Someone explain. Number 6, man begot man. Genesis 5. Now I kind of mentioned this last time when I talked about Cain's surprise wife who showed up out of nowhere, but that's not the only instance where women are assumed to be there but are never spoken about. In Genesis 5, 1 to 32, there is just a list of the children that Adam and Eve had and how old they were. It starts like this. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters, and all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. So, lived a long time, had sons and daughters, but we're mostly just talking about the son. It goes on like this, only mentioning the names of the men and saying that they had the children. They begat the children, though what were their wives doing? Seth had Enos, Enos begat Canaan, and so forth. The most they say is that they had daughters, and also everyone lived up to 800 to 900 years. God, I could do with that time. Seriously. Come on, Sky Daddy, help us out here. Alright, number 5. I didn't see him, but Exodus 33:23. Again, Moses and the Lord. Pretty tight, though we are going to learn some more stuff about him later. Who said it was easy being friends with the deity? They hadn't really met yet, but they were going to. Moses was super excited. After Moses had done a whole bunch of stuff for the Lord, he finally had the guts to ask to meet him face to face. However, when it came time for the moment of truth, the Lord said, "Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." And the Lord said, "Behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock, and it shall come to pass, while my glory passeth by, that I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. And I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen." So no, Moses wasn't allowed to see the Lord's face. But hey, no complaints about that. Let's move on. Number 4, they want to do what now? Judges 19:22. The Bible is chaos. It's carnage, the whole thing. And there is no point that proves it more than this one. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such outrageous things." What? Now it's important. I didn't want anything bad to happen to anyone in the house, but he's like, "Yeah, sure, take my virgin daughter and this concubine." What? Now it's important to note that this is the New International Version, though the passage is presented in the King James, it's just not as specific. However, it does continue to say that the concubine, the guy's wife, was attacked all night, and in the morning her husband divided her into 12 pieces and sends them to the 12 tribes of Israel. What on earth is the moral of this story? Pray tell me, because I have no clue. No idea. Number 3, a questionable marriage offer. Samuel 18:25-27. We all know what it's like to be in love. Heck, stories about people climbing mountains and defeating foes for their love are riddled throughout history. But when Saul told David what he had to do in order to marry his daughter Michelle, he did not expect what the demand was going to be. But he did it anyway, because David is a good guy. Good guy David. Saul wasn't a huge fan of David, and no one really understood why, besides the fact that God really loved David and Saul was jealous. But in fact, everyone loved David, especially his daughter Michelle. His plan was to ensnare David by making him his son-in-law, and David, being a good guy David, accepted though he had nothing to give. So Saul told his servants to tell David, "The king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Whew, that's brutal. Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. He never actually planned for him to come back with all of these foreskins. But David, being good guy David, came back, counted the skins in front of him. Now Saul had all these foreskins, and Michelle and David got married. What did he do with them after? What do you do with that many of them? Number 2, Jesus curses a fig tree. There are a lot of great lessons about humanity in the Bible for sure, but sometimes there are moments like these that, furrow some brows. In Mark 11, when Jesus comes to Jerusalem as king, there is a very peculiar moment where Jesus curses a fig tree. The passage goes as follows. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. Then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. We all know what it's like to be hangry, but no one told Jesus that figs aren't always in season? Later, his disciples see the tree withered away and marvel at the sign of his divinity, and Jesus uses it as a teachable moment about prayer and why you shouldn't hold grudges. And last but not least, the random appearance of women / Adam's ribs. Okay, so when I read the creation story, one thing that really stood out to me, and I remain confused to this day, is that like women just kind of appeared after the story. Anyways, I'll continue. So God made man from dust off the ground and put him in the Garden of Eden. When it was time for him to have a companion, God put him to sleep and took out one of his ribs, and then with this rib he made Eve. Then a whole bunch of stuff happened with the tree of life. God punished them. Adam and Eve went to have 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel because he was jealous that God liked his offering more, therefore committing the first murder. And it continues to say in Genesis 4, and I quote, "Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him, so he would live forever. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch." The entire time, up until this point, no one has said anything about Eve giving birth to a girl. So where the heck did Cain's wife come from? Then his son Enoch had a son named Lamech, who all of a sudden had not 1 but 2 wives. Apparently Adam and Eve did have 20 or some odd daughters, but why in the entirety of the creation story? And I read all of it. They are not mentioned. They just say they had sons and daughters. Where were they? No idea. Number 10. Love Jesus, hate your mom and dad. Luke 14:25-26. "And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned and said unto them, If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Okay, so the explanation behind this one is that in order to love God, you must love him the most out of anyone else in your life. But do you really have to hate everyone else? Like really? Hate's a strong word. Like mom and dad didn't make the cut? People that gave birth to you and raised you? Really? By some modern interpretations that I found, apparently to hate someone actually meant to love less back then, not to completely abhor. So it's understandable that this phrase would seem really aggressive. For a man who preaches love and the love of God, it definitely feels pretty strange that he would ask anyone to hate anyone else, especially your family. Still, I honestly don't think it's possible for me to love anyone more than my own family because, well, they are the frickin' best. So, sorry. Guess I'm taking a back seat. Number 9, no rocks, no dice. Deuteronomy 23:1. "He that is wounded in the stones or hath his privy member cut off shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord." I forgot to mention that I'm pulling these passages from the King James and the New International Version, just so you know, so they're kind of like a mix. So apparently God didn't allow any man with damaged or missing jiggly bits into heaven he didn't consider whole. Which I guess answers the questions, if you lose a finger it's not waiting for you up in heaven. According to some Bible interpretations, though an emasculated person was loved by God, he was trying to teach the world the differences between holy and unholy, clean and unclean, perfect and imperfect, therefore holy and not. Therefore, someone who was not complete could not enter heaven. But this is pretty open-ended. Does this mean that even if a guy got like accidentally hit during a soccer game, he couldn't go to heaven? Or if a dude tripped and fell like the wrong way and his rocks flew in a different direction, they couldn't enter the pearly gates? These are the questions we all need answers to. Or do we? Do we really want to know? Do we really want to know? I don't. I don't think I do. Yes, I do. I'm kidding. I do. Number 8, sexy jewelry. Ezekiel 16:17. This one reminds me a little of Pygmalion from Greek mythology, but somehow I'm more confused because it's actually like not a happy ending. It's more like we're punishing you, and it's a metaphor. It's a whole bunch of things. The passage goes as follows: "Thou hast also taken thy fair jewels of my gold and of my silver, which I had given thee, and madest to thyself images of men, and didst commit whoredom with them." Yup. That's exactly as it sounds. In this passage, the Lord is referring to a young girl saved by Yahweh, whom he would eventually marry and turn into the most beautiful woman across nations. But apparently she wasn't faithful to the marriage covenant, built shrines to other gods, and acted as immorally under God. This was also a metaphor for the relationship between God and Israel, about their faithfulness to the Lord God. God saved Israel by making them his people on Mount Sinai, and just like the woman in the story, they were unfaithful to him. Wow, like wrap your head around that. Like what? What do you mean? Just say what you mean. Just say what you mean. Like pretty elaborate metaphor if you ask me. Especially colorful when you think about the aforementioned passage where like gold and silver were turned into something that you could have a night with. I'm confused.
Number 7. Jesus' body. We haven't found the body of Jesus, of course, thousands of years later. This task is proving to be quite difficult. And according to the Bible, Jesus died but returned after 3 days and then suddenly vanished. His body is said to just not exist anymore. Where's the body? Where did it go? Did someone steal it? Let's talk. In order to preserve a body in the first place for that amount of time, you need to be a pro at mummification, and Romans nor Jews practiced such a thing at that time. So if you did find a tomb, the tomb of Jesus per se, his bones, well, they turned to dust about 100 years after his death, so it would be empty. There's many who believe the body of Jesus was removed from the tomb before Easter Sunday, or like I said, it was stolen. Either way, it was for sure empty. The Romans were in charge of law and order at this time, so there's also a theory where Romans took his body, but there's no motivation there that checks out. Because if they stole a body, they could have brought it out at any time and then halted Christian faith. Did Jesus' disciples take the body as well? Still the biggest mystery right here, folks.
On number 6, crucified. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ is seen as one of the most important events in the Christian gospel. According to the gospel, Jesus was crucified at the hands of Pontius Pilate, and the skies darkened for hours afterwards. Some see this event as a miracle or an omen of dark times that lied ahead. Some researchers have tried to explain this phenomenon using astronomy. Some tie the event of Jesus' crucifixion to a solar eclipse that lasted 2 minutes in 29 CE, and others say that a second total eclipse caused the darkness over 4 minutes back in 33 CE. Either way, this phenomenon is still inexplicable and remains yet another mystery.
Number 5. Resurrection. On the 3rd day after his crucifixion, Christ was resurrected. We call this event Easter. It's a major feast day of the church, and these accounts of Christ being reborn can now be found in the 4 Gospels: Mark, Luke, Matthew, and John. In the letters of the Apostle Paul, found in the New Testament, it's again stated that Christ rose from the dead. Now, some are convinced that disciples of the Lord were not telling lies, but even so, Jesus could have been resurrected in a non-physical form. But in Luke 24:39, Jesus himself denied that he was a spirit. He said, "Look at my hands and my feet, it is myself. Touch me and see, a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." The disciples were also the first non-believers too, Luke 24:11, and these words appealed to them as nonsense and they would not believe in them. The risen Christ appeared to his disciples in the upper room, which was behind locked doors, and then he disappeared in front of their eyes. But how? The resurrection of Jesus Christ, of course, is one of the biggest mysteries.
At number 4, the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin has been highly debated and, dare I say, shrouded in mystery. The shroud is said to have covered Jesus' body after the crucifixion and shows a faint image of a man's face and torso, believed to be Jesus himself. This find has been debated for years, and the more research and testing people do, the more muddled things get. The search for the shroud's authenticity has been going on for decades, and there's still no definitive answer of whether it is real or not, and if the face and torso seen in the shroud really do belong to Jesus as well. The Catholic Church doesn't have a stance on whether or not the shroud is authentic, but science is determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. Carbon dating has suggested that the cloth is less than 8,000 years old, meaning that it may have come from some time in the Middle Ages. But a study done in 2014 suggested that perhaps an ancient earthquake that affected Jerusalem may have created an ionic image in the shroud, as well as, quote, altered the radiocarbon levels that later suggested that the shroud was a medieval forgery, end quote. Right now, there are more questions to be answered than ever before, so it may be a while before this mystery is solved.
Number 3. He split what? Where? Genesis 38:8-10. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. I mean, can you fault a guy for not wanting to make offspring with his dead brother's wife? Can you? I know that populating the earth back then was like a really big deal, but really? This just sounds like there was absolutely no respect for consent in this one. But considering some previous tales, like the one above, the Bible's no stranger to that. Also, prior to this, the Lord deemed Onan's older brother, wicked in his eyes, so he just took him out. So Onan was also probably still mourning the death of his brother and wasn't really in the mood. So I can kind of get it. But why? Anyways, let's move on. Number 2, he did what? Judges 3:21-25. This next one kind of reminds me of a biblical version of Fat Bastard from Austin Powers, if I'm being honest. King Eglon of Moab was apparently a very smarmy dude who was assassinated by the only left-handed person mentioned in the Bible. Fun fact. Ehud was a left-handed man that was sent by the Israelites to assassinate Eglon. What astounds me about this passage are the details they dive into. So when Ehud goes to meet Eglon, he of course disguises his reason for being there by bringing in tribute. But after he's presented it, he tells Eglon that he's got a secret message for him. So Eglon sends his servants away because he's excited to find out what it is. Now Eglon is described as a very fat man. Verbatim. That's how he's described. And apparently his servants were also used to him having bouts of severe indigestion. I'll let the Bible tell the rest. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out and the fat closed over it. Then Ehud went out to the porch, he shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said, "He must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace." They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their lord fall onto the floor, dead. Is this an insensitive poop joke or a fat joke? I really can't tell. It's just a farce. What is going on here? It's a farce. That was dumb. I'm gonna leave. Number 1, last but not least, fending off God. Exodus 4:21. Okay, so this one really almost made me rage quit. I called my mom to talk about the Bible because we had no idea what was going on. Because my whole family is Catholic, and I was like, what is this? Okay, so after he says I'm gonna harden his heart, let my son go, I'm gonna kill your oldest sons, all that stuff, he threatens the Pharaoh that if he doesn't let Israel go, then he will kill his firstborn son. But then, right after, he says this. He tries to kill Moses. "And it came to pass by the way in the inn that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet and said, 'Surely a bloody husband art thou to me.' So he let him go. Then she said, 'A bloody husband thou art because of this circumcision.'" So basically, God comes across Moses, tries to kill him, Zipporah cuts off her son's foreskin, throws it at God's feet and is like, "Get away from here, but also I'm really mad at you, Moses, because now you've made me bloody." I don't understand. Is God trying to kill Moses? I thought he was trying to kill the Pharaoh's sons. I don't understand. It's so confusing. How can God be all stoked about Moses one second and then want to kill him the next? I know that God, as punishment to the Pharaoh later, kills all the firstborn sons of Egypt, but that's way ahead in Exodus 11. So what's going on here?
At number 10, birthday. I would have thought that Jesus' birthday would have been one of the most straightforward things about him in regards to facts about him, but apparently his birthday is one of the biggest mysteries that surround him. Though many people believe that Jesus was born on December 25th, aka Christmas, cause happy birthday Jesus, there's a debate that suggests that the date that a lot of people celebrate as Jesus' birthday is incorrect. In 2008, an astronomer named David Renicky suggested that the Star of Bethlehem, a celestial event commonly associated with Jesus' birth, may have actually been a phenomenon where the planets Venus and Jupiter came together to form a bright light in the sky. Using computer modeling, David was able to determine that this celestial event took place sometime around June 17th in the year 2 BCE. This means that perhaps Jesus was a Gemini, not a Sagittarius, whatever that means. Other researchers have placed Jesus' birth sometime in October of the year 7 BCE, and others have suggested that Jesus was born sometime in the spring because of the tales of his birth mentioning shepherds watching over their flock on the night that Jesus was born, which is something that would have been done in the spring and not the winter.
Number 9. Where was he born? So we've covered what day he was born, and it turns out Christmas in October sounds pretty awesome. Let's just combine our favorite holidays and get it done with. But now we have to cover the next important topic. Where was he born? Well, according to biblical sources, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. This is widely known at this point, but perhaps it's not completely accurate. The New Testament Gospels don't agree on this. They don't believe Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Some of them don't even mention it once. In fact, some don't mention the Lord at all. Biblical studies are asking why Jesus was called a Nazarene and a Galilean through the New Testament, and with no mention of his birthplace, obviously people will ask questions. Was he born in Nazareth? Well, Philip J. King answered this question in his Biblical Views column. He said the towns of Bethlehem is traditionally Jesus' birthplace, and Nazareth is Jesus' home. It's like when you say you're from the city, but you're not really from the city. You know what I mean?
And number 8, married. Out of the things that we know about Jesus Christ, one thing that remains unsolved is his marital status. Was Jesus married or not? Obviously, they didn't have Tinder back then to meet people, and there was no MySpace top 10 to really give us a clue of who Jesus was close to, so really we only have speculation, theories, and some clues to go off to try and solve the mystery of whether or not Jesus had a wife. Some biblical scholars have suggested that Jesus was married and that his wife was Mary Magdalene, a woman who was frequently mentioned in the New Testament. In the Gospel of Philip, there is evidence to suggest that Jesus was married, as there are words in the manuscript that read, quote, "There were 3 who always walked with the Lord, Mary his mother, her sister, and Magdalene, the one who was called his companion," end quote. On top of that, in a recently discovered scrap of papyrus known as the Gospel of Jesus' Wife, the document contained lines which said, quote, "Jesus said to them, 'My wife,'" end quote. There is no definite proof of whether or not Jesus was married in fact or not, so this remains a mystery.
Number 7, Lilith versus Eve. Okay, so apparently the only time Lilith is ever alluded to in the Bible is in Isaiah 34 as the screech owl. But beyond that, there is no mention of Lilith before Eve in the creation story, at least in the King James Bible as I found. But she is called Lilith in DBT, the Darby translation. Here's what's confusing. Why does she appear so much in our lore? She actually appears as a she-vampire in the legends of the Talmud as Adam's first wife, who was born from Earth like him, not from his rib. Then according to the medieval work of the alphabet of Ben Sirach, he recounts her story in more detail. After she was created, they immediately fell out and Lilith left Eden. Divorce. God sent 3 angels after her to convince her to return, but she denied them. God said that if she didn't return, 100 of her children would die every day. She agreed to the terms, but then said that up until a boy is 8, she will have power over them, and the same thing until a girl is 20. Unless they had angels written on a talisman, then she would do them no harm. So that's very confusing. I don't know how they arrived at that arrangement. But considering Lilith is only mentioned in the Christian Bible once, how has she become such a prolific character in the creation story? She's depicted in multiple TV shows as a leader in the apocalypse, but so little is really known about her unless you cross things over to other texts. So fascinating and confusing. Number 6, the Nephilites, Genesis 6, 1-14. Giant angel hybrids. Yeah, you heard me right. In Genesis 6, the Bible mentions that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any that they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. Also, we used to live forever. What? The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them. So these are the children of the sons of God. Then later they are described as giants when Numbers 13, the land we explored devours those living in it and all the people we saw there are great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes and we looked like the same to them. I'm not sure what's going on here. Were the sons of God men on earth? Or was the Bible referring to angels mating with human women so they could give birth to giant babies? It's just a whole smorgasbord of confusion. Number 5, Noah cursed his grandson. So most people know the story of Noah and the ark and how by order of God, he built the ark to save his family and friends, but then God destroyed the rest with a massive flood. But apparently seeing him naked was like a massive offense. So God said to Noah to go ahead and populate the earth, and God made a covenant with Noah that he would never drown the earth again. As a reward, he gave Noah everything, and to celebrate, Noah grew a vineyard and got drunk on the wine. So drunk that he passed out, naked. Noah's son, Ham, then found him, told his brothers, and they grabbed a cloth, backed up, so they wouldn't see him, and put the cloth over his naked body. But when Noah woke up, he was angry that his son Ham had seen him naked, so he cursed his grandson Canaan. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will be his brothers." Canaan was Ham's son, who had done nothing wrong, but then he was cursed to be a slave for the rest of his life. It just made no sense. Number 4, a talking donkey. Numbers 22, 28 to 30. I learned select stories growing up in the background of my religious education, but somehow this one escaped me. I didn't know about this one. The story of Balaam's donkey is often overlooked, probably because the reason it's there is a bit confusing. One day, while Balaam was riding his donkey, the angel of the Lord appeared in the road, so the donkey tried to swerve. Balaam beat her back onto the path. Then the angel moved to a corner that provided no alternative route, so the donkey just laid down. Then, and I quote, "Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and it said to Balaam, 'What have I done to you to make you beat me these 3 times?' Balaam answered the donkey, 'You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now.'" Escalated very quickly. Also, he didn't even acknowledge that his donkey is now talking to him. The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" "No," he said. Pretty reasonable conversation, I like his argument, but Balaam didn't seem at all shocked that his donkey was speaking to him, and wasn't even grateful for the fact that the angel was trying to kill Balaam and the donkey actually saved his life. But my question is, did the donkey continue to speak after this?
Number 3, pagan god. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Jesus Christ, many believe, is that he was a pagan god. Typically, Jesus is compared to gods like Horus or Osiris, but deities were also born from a virgin. Deities also referred to themselves as the Son of God. They too performed miracles. They also died and came back. Authors of the book The Jesus Mysteries, Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, believe that Christianity wasn't this new revelation, and in fact, it was a continuation of paganism, just with a new name. They believe the story of Jesus is not the late tale of a Messiah, but rather a Jewish reworking of pagan myth, particularly the god Osiris Dionysus, which had already been widely known about in the ancient Mediterranean. Osiris Dionysus, born on the same day, before 3 shepherds, offered his followers baptism and then died at Easter. These guys go off in this book, and they blame humans for not understanding ancient spirituality enough to recognize that these were just in fact myths. Retelling older myths to create newer ones, that was normal in the ancient world.
At number 2, walking on water. Perhaps the biggest mystery surrounding Jesus Christ is whether it is true that he really did walk on water. Jesus is said to have performed a number of miracles, but one of his most famous ones was walking on water. People have been trying to explain this phenomenon for ages, but it still remains a mystery. Jesus claimed to have walked on the water of the Sea of Galilee, and research suggests that this might be true, however the water might have been frozen at the time. Researchers have suggested that there might have been a cold snap that caused the freshwater lake to freeze over, and Jesus could have just stood on a floating patch of ice, and this could explain the phenomenon, but it's not exactly confirmed.
And finally, number 1, water into wine. Okay, so now we're getting into some party tricks that Jesus could pull off. The whole walking on water thing is pretty impressive, but when he turns water into wine, okay, now we're talking. But where did this come from? Could he really do that? Make mythological Merlot? On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Galilee. Jesus was there, and so was his mother Mary. And like most weddings, there was a fair amount of wine spilled. So much so that they ran out. Sounds like a pretty good wedding. There were, however, 6 jars of water nearby, and when some was gifted to the master of the banquet, he was shocked. After all that wine, he said, this was the best of the night, and it was just a jar of water a minute ago. This is mind-blowing. This is one of the biggest things that we talk about when it comes to J-bones. This was one of the earliest signs that revealed his glory. Did Jesus alter the molecular composition of water? Maybe, but was it wine or was it really grape juice? After all that wine that they bragged about drinking, maybe the best wine that was saved for last was actually flavored water and they were in fact hammered. The first sip of water after a night out tastes pretty amazing, so I'd be confused too.